There we are. Great. That'll be for Carolyn. All right, well, good morning. Good morning, good morning. Oh, nice, that worked. That's amazing. All right, you see me, I've got my phone open. The reason why is we are going to be tracking with our folks who join us online. And so if our folks join us online while we're live, we'll answer questions from them as well. And want to welcome you. Obviously, if you had a little bit of chance, we have an array of things to look at across the back. I actually created both of those photo books. The tour we did, how long has it been now? 5 years since we went on the last Israel tour. But what I do is I take the best pictures from some of our travelers. I do a lot of the photography on the trip, and we put together the book. And man, that's just an amazing conversation piece to have in your home. An amazing thing. All right, what are we going to do? We are going to, I'm going to show you a couple worship songs. The reason we do worship is we worship in Israel. So I love these two worship videos. The first one is a Messianic church in Israel. They do an amazing job. They're so much fun. And then the second song is by my man crush. Remember Joshua Aaron? I told you about him on the last meeting. I love this guy. He's an amazing singer-songwriter. And so you can YouTube Joshua Aaron, and you'll catch his music. The song that he's going to sing is called Hoshiana, which means please save. And so the song he wrote was the song for the nations, that it was an intercessory song for the nations and for their salvation. And so on his videos, often he'll have different places of Israel where he's singing. And so I love his videos. They're amazing. So we're going to do these two worship songs, and then we'll get started.
Adonai, afraid. The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I be afraid? By which we are saved, but the name of the Lord. Oh, let the world know your name. Oh, that the nations will call on the name of the Lord. The name of shall I fear? The Lord is my light, my
Joshua Aaron, he lives in Tiberias on the Sea of Galilee. So last trip we coordinated with him, and he came with his ukulele and did some of his music. We're sitting watching the Sea of Galilee while he's leading music, and it was just amazing. If you YouTube him, check him out. There's one song in particular. I love a song that he wrote about the tribes and the nations. And singing with him, it's a live concert at the Tower of David in Jerusalem. He's singing with a Native American chief. And they're mixing both the Native Americans' language, Hebrew, and English in the song. And it's amazing. All right, you can tell I love the guy, right? All right, let's just go ahead and get the number one question out of the way that everybody has. What about COVID? And are we still traveling to Israel? I can give you an update. I talked to the tour company. The country of Israel is now 25% vaccinated, fully vaccinated. Over 60% already have their first shot headed to the second shot. Israel's philosophy is, if not all, almost 100% of their country will be vaccinated before they open up. Right now, they are not taking tours. So I know of a group that was going to tour in May. They're out of luck this year. They are going to be accepting some foreign travelers, but not Americans until probably June-ish. You dirty, filthy Americans. And so here's what I want you to know. We don't know what guidelines Israel's going to have, nor do we know what our government will also impose when the time comes. We have to continue to plan to tour. I have every expectation we're going to be touring next spring. And it'll just depend on if there's going to be any additional guidelines. It would appear that Israel's approach to it is we'll vaccinate our country, thus eliminating many of the restrictions they might impose on travelers coming in. Does that make sense? Okay. And so at that point, it will just depend on your own comfort level and where things are at. And so I thought that was worthwhile. Does that answer that question? Is that helpful to hear that? Okay. All right, here we go. Passport. Listen, if you're sitting here and you're thinking, I would love to go on this trip, and you're just not sure, but you don't have your passport, I always say the number one thing is immediately get your passport. It's a process. You might have to find your birth certificate, okay? And if you've never gotten before, it's a bit of a process. I think the total, actually, you can do it right here in Coquille at the post office. If I'm not mistaken, I think the cost is somewhere between $100 to $150. And so you should have your passport. And here's another excellent reason why. Not too long ago, Levin and I traveled, and the big question is the Oregon identification cards or ID cards or driver's license going to be usable anymore for TSA? And if you haven't already changed that or don't want to go through the expense, but you want to get your passport, you can travel with your passport, domestic and foreign, anywhere and use that. I don't even use my driver's license anymore for travel. I use my passport. And so I just raise that as if you need to invest and you're going to travel soon anyways, do the passport because that opens up your horizons for travel and last minute travel and the things you might want to do or God calls you to do, okay? Let's see here. So that's important. You should be getting your passport. Tour dates, just a reminder, April 25th through May 7th. There's brochures in the back. In the brochures is a full itinerary. I mean, that's pretty close to what we're doing. There's registration form. If you're registering, you'll fill out that form and you'll mail it in with your deposit to Pilgrim Tours, okay? So actually, you won't be putting payments to us. You'll send them in to Pilgrim Tours, and that gets you all lined up. And then January 14th is the deadline for the deposit. And then February 25th is the deadline for the entire rest of the funds. One of the favorite questions people ask me is, should I get the insurance or not? The travel insurance is going to be your preference. I've done it both ways. In fact, in our last trip Levin and I made, that was the first time ever in all of my traveling, both foreign and domestic, that I've had a bag lost. And so the insurance will cover you on some of the things. What it will not cover you, let me be very clear, If you watch our media and our news, things that are happening in Israel can be grossly inflated. And suddenly you'll get nervous because 1 week before, oh my gosh, there's riots everywhere and it's out of control and my life is in jeopardy. Listen, if the tour company does not close it down because of those reasons, you cannot claim the insurance and not go. Rest assured, remember we covered this last meeting, it is safer in Israel than all of our major metropolitan cities in the United States, period. And just a reminder, on our last tour, there was this hubbub. We saw it in the news. We had people calling us from the United States, oh my gosh, are you guys okay? And we're like, we watched the local news. There was like 6 individuals and they threw a couple fire bombs. It was immediately put out. They were dispelled. There was nothing that happened, but the Western media inflated it, okay? So we will track that, and we will keep you informed through the travel company, but you are safe in Israel. And so one thing you cannot use the insurance for is claim your safety, because that just doesn't work. Does that make sense? Okay. All right. What else? What else do I need to do? Do we have another slide? Look at that. Okay, come on now. After you've just flown 14 hours, do you not want to just go there? That's exactly where we'll end up, on the Mediterranean, our first night. That is, Pastor Dave's going to come up here in just a moment and talk about Caesarea and our first day. That is a picture from the beach near the Hippodrome in Caesarea Maritime. I'm going to show you, here we go. So, circled in the center is Netanya. If you look down below to see Tel Aviv near the bottom of the map, we fly into Tel Aviv. We'll catch our bus and our tour guide. So our tour guide and our bus meet us at the airport. From there on, we are with them all the rest of the trip until they bring us back to the airport. Okay, you will love our bus driver. You will love our tour guide. They become family on our tour. We travel up to Netanya and stay on the Mediterranean. Our hotel literally will be overlooking a walkway and the Mediterranean. And so it just depends on what time of the day we get in. But I know this, many who've traveled that first night, you are so excited, you are so exhausted, and the thought occurs to you, I can't not go out on the Mediterranean. And it could be midnight and you haven't slept for 20 hours and you won't care. You'll go out on the Mediterranean. It's amazing. And if you like shells, when we went, Levin and I went, the whole beach was shells. It was different than the Oregon coast, of course, a lot warmer. And then from Netanya, we head up. Now, when we stay one night, now just a reminder for our tour, we come in and we stay one night. Okay? The next night, we're on the Sea of Galilee for 4 nights. And so we changed up our tour. We did not like the extra night on the Mediterranean. We preferred it to be on the Sea of Galilee. And so, literally, you'll have your bag in your room. You'll kind of get situated. You'll pick out your clothes for the next day. You'll leave everything else because in the morning, at a set time, you'll eat breakfast, and the bus is leaving. Now, in this particular case, the bus will not leave without you, but in Sea of Galilee and Jerusalem, the bus will leave without you. So obviously, we don't want to leave you in Netanya as we make our way to Sea of Galilee. So the point being, make sure you have alarms, make sure you work with the hotels for wake-up calls, and just know what time you're supposed to be at the bus, because when we're on the Sea of Galilee and in Jerusalem, we will not hold up the tour for latecomers. It's not because we don't love you, it's because we got a lot to do. And so we give people plenty of time. All right. Any questions so far? Yep. Yes. 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 Awesome. So the question being, yes, the tour does fly out of LAX. And the reason we did that is we could get better flights out of LAX and we could cheapen it a bit. And so it's a direct flight. So we're not going to head off to some other airport. We're going to direct flight to Tel Aviv. That's the plan. Now, the reason we did that as well is we know that many people have air miles through either their credit debit cards or through their own personal travel, so they can arrange cheap flights. Actually, the flights to LAX are cheap and fast. So yeah, so the main idea there, and when we get closer, we're not going to know our flights until probably April, May of this year, okay? Once we know the flights, we will proffer to the tour group an idea, depending on the time of flight. If you want to arrive a night early, we will look for a group rate and stay at a hotel near the airport so that we're just there collecting and then arriving at the airport. For our folks online and who are joining us from all over the country, because there are, they can join us at LAX if they're on the West Coast. If they're on the East Coast, you can join us in Tel Aviv. You just need to work through the tour company, okay? But if you're on the West Coast, you plan to fly with us out of LAX, then you'll know when you need to get there. You'll know when the flight leaves. We will be all together at that point on the same flight flying to Tel Aviv. And so, yeah, I know for Levin and I, it's likely that our preference will be to arrive a day early. We do not like stressing out on travel day. And so we will likely arrive a day early and coordinate an inexpensive hotel near the airport and then just catch a shuttle to the airport. And so, again, we will coordinate a group rate if that's how many of you wish to travel. Good question. Any other questions so far? Well, Pastor Dave, why don't you come on up? Here's what we're going to do. The next two meetings are really informational, but we're starting to incorporate our day travels and some biblical and historical lessons attached to that. Pastor Dave's going to share from over here. And our first day, we start to tour Caesarea Maritime, and that is a top view of Caesarea Maritime. And it is just a magnificent first stop. By the way, on our first day, when we start touring, we're exhausted, okay? We'll just get that out of the way. But remember, you're so hopped up on Israel adrenaline, you'll do fine. And after we tour Caesarea Maritime, we're in the bus for a little while. We're catching the sights to our next stop. Our first day is really not strenuous at all, and we will have time to recover. But Pastor Dave, take it away.
Thank you very much. Am I on?
Yep.
Good, all right. I can't lean on the podium like I do at church, you know. So, welcome, I'm Pastor Dave from Coos Bay, the Foursquare Church there, pastor there for the last 31 years. I drove into town, tried to get out, and I kept going west, and I couldn't get out of town, you know. So anyways, we're here. Welcome, and this is our second meeting, and I've just got to say, one of the things that you might want to do is set yourself up a folders, because you'll start picking up all kinds of information like I do and dropping it everywhere, and just put it in there, put it in sequence. A number of tour books, all that kind of stuff, you know, go along with it. We're actually going to talk today about Caesarea, and then on up to Mount Carmel, and then on over to Megiddo and Arbel, which is overlook of the Sea of Galilee. It's that first sweep, we call it the first day of our travels in Israel. But actually, it's our third day, and you'll find the first day is highly compressed because you're heading with the sun, and you wake up the next day in the late night. You know, it's that kind of a situation. And am I ever glad that it is a nonstop flight? Because the flight, you kind of want to close your eyes and take a couple of buffering and forget, you know, if you don't have the window. Forget who you're sitting next to. Don't worry about it, you know. I'm not sure on this one. 14 hours. It beats the 20-some hours when you have a couple of stops and you sit there for a while, you know, things like that. So glad to do it. One thing, are we on El Al? We're on El Al. They get up and pray every 3 hours, you know, so everybody walks to the door and, you know, looks towards Jerusalem. So, in other words, they're very good about letting you get up and walk around and stretch your legs and keep yourself from getting, you know, too cramped up and stuff like that. So that's a lot of fun. So the first day, like I said, is that flight day. Second day, you sort of wake up on that day and we'll get a good night's sleep. and then we head up to Caesarea. And Caesarea is just, the things I want to say about it here a little bit is it was really the political capital, if you want to put it, for the nation of Israel over its history. It's the place where any of the Gentile rulers like to hang out. They didn't want to hang out in the middle of the controversies, the religious controversies of Jerusalem and the like. And so what you'll find with most of them, they lived down there. It was first, Caesarea was the first, if you will, hospitable, south of Haifa, up north, seaport. In other words, the ability to have trade, or to have, as the Romans eventually took over, to make it a military port as well. So it was developed by Herod the Great, as we know, and he was known as the great builder in Israel, and built up all of these wonderful sites and made Caesarea into a real Roman-style port and center of play and activity. They have their theaters, Greek-style theaters, and their hippodrome, and the place for their games and everything, and palaces and things like that. So it looked very much like you were in a typical Roman-type environment. It was a mixed culture. A lot of the trade went through there. The spice trades from the east came through there, and the international trade. And so there was it was in ancient times, it was, or the times of Christ, it was a very popular place for trade, and made the nation of Israel quite wealthy from that perspective in that area. So looking at that, stopping there as our first place, we see a lot of history, a lot of deep history, especially around the times of Jesus. It's Caesarea Maritime is what they call it, because it's on the Mediterranean coast, and as compared to Caesarea Philippi, which is up north of the Sea of Galilee, which we'll be going to as well, and it has a little different connotation there. If you could read up on it, it was noted first by the Sidonians from the north, who controlled that area, and they had there a tower, and they called it the Strato Tower, and that was what it was noted for, a lookout, for the sea travel and or the any movement from the south from Egypt. And this was the crossover point between north and south, from the armies that moved up and down the coast at times. And it was captured by the Romans in about BC 90, and then it was turned over to Herod the Great, and he developed it. Made a port there, a harbor, and we'll see that. And he built his own palace right out on the water, and put up a great hippodrome and all kinds of sites that you'll be able to see there. So it was rebuilt by Herod the Great, and it was named in honor of Augustus Caesar. Okay, Caesarea Caesar, in that naming approach. The place held the entire Roman fleet when it would come in, and it was noted, for that. Pontius Pilate governed from there from AD 6 on up until the time of Jesus, in that era that we know of Jesus. And in Acts 8:26-40, Philip makes his way there after his quite a journey. Philip is one of the leaders, in Jerusalem, and then God calls him to go down to a city in Samaria, which is really that northern area, central area of Israel, and he goes from there. The Lord calls him to head towards Gaza, and as he heads towards Gaza, he intersects the Ethiopian eunuch, as you know, going back to Egypt, intersects him, preaches the gospel to him, and he is baptized, and then all of a sudden Philip disappears, and they find him up in a place called Ashdod, which is a little bit north up from Gaza. It's going up the coast. And Ashdod is what we know the name of from ancient times. And he begins to preach there. So notice he just, I call it one of the early raptures, He just caught away by the Lord. And goes up to Ashdod, and then he hits all the small cities up to Caesarea. And later on, we discover that he planted himself there and preached and developed quite a movement going on there. He was really one of the centers of that area. And has these daughters that preach, and that prophesy. And Paul himself, when he comes back from his second missionary journey, centers there. or stops there and moves on again for his third missionary journey. So it's quite a center of political, or the coast, if you will, the coast life and the Roman influence. Most of the Roman leaders, from Herod, and Herod, through Pilate and the others, they preferred to stay there rather than up in the religious center, of Jerusalem. So as time goes on there, I liken it to, when I think of what's there, when you come and you see it, you see this embedded history of the Roman influence over Israel, but you also see that it very much is like any other country. There's a political center to the country that is oftentimes ruled by a class of people that really have very little to do with the day-to-day life, if you will. As you go through there now, the cities that are around it, from there, Tel Aviv on up to Caesarea, that whole population base area is more like our Silicon Valley, if you will, on the new construction that's there. As we went through Tel Aviv and on the bus, you will notice that every other place you look, there's new construction of high-rise apartments. It's starting to look more like New York, in a sense. And as we went through, the tour guide told us that they anticipated by the year 2025, which is about 100 years from now when I heard that, and now it's been another 5, 6, 7 years, since the last, I've been there 3 times, and I heard those kind of words, that they expect their population density in Israel to be one of the most densely populated nations on the planet. Now, when I think of China and India and places like that, I think, wait a minute, now they got a lot of people there. But for the size of the country, the immigration and the density of the population, and right in that area is where it will be just like big cities, just like our big cities. So there are big contrasts that you'll see as you move along, and then find these historical sites right in the middle of that area. Now, another thing, as you start to begin, as you start to see some of these ancient things and it'll line up for you, there's other little statistics that I remember hearing, and that is that there is something like, in Israel, can't do any construction or anything without having the Department of Antiquities, check out your property. And much like we have checking for snail darters, they're looking for ancient history, and they have over 25,000 recorded archaeological sites that they consider are worthy looking into, because it will give us hints to the history, of ancient Israel. And they've only developed, meaning done the actual digs and, developed things that we go to see, in about 250 of them. So in one sense, you're walking over territory or driving past things that in future years are still going to need to be developed, so that you would take advantage of wanting to stop there. And there are some places like that will end up going. So Caesarea is the beginning of that, and there's been a lot of archaeological digs there, and there are still other areas of even Caesarea that are just now being opened, that were developed by Herod the Great at that time. So I just wanted to give you that as an overview for all of the sites that we'll be thinking about going to. There's much more to see. So, think of Philip. He goes from Samaria down to Gaza, then up to Ashdod, and then up the coast preaching, and lands at Caesarea. And he stays there, develops his family, in that particular area. And if you look at Acts chapter 10, I'm going for Acts chapter 8, Acts chapter 9. Paul, as he starts his life, up in Damascus, being born again and filled with the Spirit and receiving a call and a mission from God. Well, he spends time there. They want to kill him there, so he heads out to Arabia for about a 3-year stint, or maybe I don't know how much of that time, but he spends it in Arabia, probably down near the Mount Sinai, trying to figure out, what this whole thing means to come to Jesus, and then all that he had learned from the Old Testament. I think he goes back where Moses first got the 10 Commandments, and of course got the revelation from God about how things should. He had to balance all that out. He comes back to Damascus. He then heads down to Jerusalem, and after a while begins to engage with people there, and the fanatics want to kill him, and they got to take him down. They take him to Caesarea. Caesarea is how you get a man out of town, okay? Or you take him to be tried. Later on, he'll be taken there to be tried. So Caesarea, again, becomes the political center. it's the political center of things. And of course, it's the place of safety, because Rome lives by laws, and they will protect Roman citizens. They find that out about Paul. He's a Roman citizen. So Caesarea is a strategic place, okay? Well, I move along. Acts chapter 10, Peter himself is down at Joppa, which is near Tel Aviv, about 10 to 15 mile trek, up to Caesarea. And at Joppa, he receives that vision from the Lord when he's hungry, nods off, turns into a vision, and he sees this sheet drop down, and what I've declared to be clean, don't you call unclean. And he receives that understanding that he needs to do whatever's coming, and he doesn't know how this is going to work. The door knock, and those that have been sent by the centurion from Caesarea say, come on up to see Cornelius, because an angel has told him that you need to come. So he goes, and right in the middle of his proclaiming to them the good things that God did for us at Jerusalem, there in Caesarea, a centurion soldier who's got great reputation, a pious man, meaning that he cares about the people and he cares about Jerusalem, he cares about Israel, and it just has a really open heart. And right in the middle of him telling about what God has done for them at Jerusalem, the Spirit of God falls on him. And they go, whoa, just like he did at Jerusalem. And this centurion and his family and all of his cohort, of those that were about him, are all filled with the Spirit. And of course, Peter has to come to the conclusion that maybe God wants to do something with the Gentiles. And that's cited by Peter as, at first, God used me to open up the way to the Gentiles. And the same thing happened up in Samaria. So Caesarea is a focal point now for the gospel being spread out through the whole known world. And that's pretty, I love that story in Acts chapter 10. In Acts chapter 12, James is killed by Herod, and Peter's imprisoned. And then Herod, and then Peter, the angel of the Lord, gets him out of prison, and Herod investigates the next day what happened. I was going to bring him forward, and make an example of him or find favor with the nation of Israel. He investigates the guards and has them all put to death. They were very, very strict, the Roman culture around them, but Peter's set free. Well, Herod, I use the word when I read it from the book of Acts, Herod fled Jerusalem. He didn't want to be around a religion that had that kind of power happening, if you will, in that regard. He heads back down to Caesarea, I think for a sense of safety maybe for himself, but he heads back down there. And again, remembering Caesarea is the place where the Romans have authority and power. And of course, then as he goes down there, in Acts 21, Paul lands at Caesarea, goes and sees Philip, and Philip is living there with his daughters, and that's where he meets Agabus. Remember Agabus? Who comes to him, and prophesies to him that so is the one who, he takes his belt, wraps it around himself, binds himself up, and said, so will the residents of Jerusalem do to the one whose belt, I have wrapped around myself. They will tie you up and deliver you. And of course, they all are asking Paul not to go up there. Stay here, in that regard. But he says, no, I'm committed to do whatever the Lord has for me. So they said, thus let it be what God has desired to do. Wow. Okay. Well, then later on, as you know, after Paul goes up there, he's arrested. And Felix is interviewing him, trying to figure out what's going on, finds out that there's a plot to kill Paul. Again, very tumultuous times, and sends him down to Caesarea in order to be tried down there and for things to be looked at. And of course, he spends several years there in prison, and eventually is talked to by Festus and Agrippa. That's Herod Agrippa II, and then there's a third, a Herod, if you will, and Bernice. And then he appeals to Rome, and he's sent from there to Rome. So I'm just trying to show you, it's the political center of everything. And one of the calls on Paul's life was to go to a place, to go to the very center of political authorities, kings, those in power, and to bear witness, to the word. So it's at Caesarea that you'll see that's where a lot of this activity takes place. Now, moving along, when you're there, you'll see a whole series of things. You'll You'll see the theater, which is a typical Greek and Roman type theater, and we'll see that. You'll see the hippodrome, and you'll see the place where they had their games and the great chariot races, as we think about, when you think of the Roman Colosseum. And you'll see the harbor that was put in there, that was built by dropping large stones into the ground, into the water, and creating this harbor. And I think you can see it up here. Yeah, up towards that. There's still some of the rocks that are left. I should have my pointer, but right out here, as you see where Herod had his palace and out into the water, but it's all been destroyed. And then up higher, this is Herod's place. And then up higher, you have the freshwater pool in the middle of the ocean, yeah, if you will. Yeah, he had his freshwater pool there, and around that built his palace and things like that. So it was very Romanesque, if you will, very opulent, this whole area. And then you have the hippodrome there, where you see that they had the races and things like that. Over on the other side, you find where a remnant of what was the harbor, and they had buildings all around the harbor, in that regard as well. And all of that was destroyed. And the final destruction was in about 130, right near the I can't get the name right, I want to say bar mitzvah, bar hekbah, whatever it was, rebellion, the last rebellion, where they came in and they just destroyed everything that had to do with Israel. And tried to wipe their identity out, change their name from Israel to Palestina, and they did that to just totally discredit the identity of and wipe it out of the nation of Israel. So all of that takes place around all this political intrigue that's there. From there, we're going to take off, and you'll see a lot of things there, but we'll take off and we'll move up the coast, and then up into the mountains of Carmel. Okay, it's a large string of mountains that starts at Haifa, and comes. Haifa kind of jets out, creates its own little harbor, a big harbor, if I can say that there. And this mountain range comes down to the southeast, okay? And it runs from about 500 feet, as we think of up to about 1,700 feet. Mount Carmel is up on the edge of it, looking right down into the Jezreel Valley and the Valley of Megiddo. And it's an incredible view as you see it right up there. They used to be swampy land in the beginning, but they have really developed it. Even when they came back in the early part of the 20th century, they began to change the whole environment there. It was really mosquito-ridden and everything else, and it was very dangerous, to live there, but they really have done a lot to bring the agriculture back. You can't see it across there. It might look like you see airstrips and things like that there. Those are literally airstrips. Some of those that where the Israeli military has their planes. You don't see the planes. They're usually tucked into the mountainsides, or in caves, if you will, where they come out. They have about a 9-minute warning about any attack from their borders. It is so narrow. In this area, some of the narrowest areas of the country are as little as 9 to 10 miles, wide. So, and you've got hostile people all over the place. So there's a lot to be seen there. You can see that's the beginning of the valley there, but it runs for, I forget what it is, 25, 30 miles or so. And it's the place of Armageddon. Okay, and up there, that's where we saw the great conflict that went on. The one that we know of the most is Elijah in 1 Kings chapter 18, where he takes on the prophets of Baal. And it was a tremendous place up there, and the view is incredible. It's where he has that fight with them in terms of choose this day whom you're going to serve. And he challenges them, if you will, to a spiritual duel. And we'll see more and more about that. You'll see the area that this took place. You can see right down into the little creek valley right there where they slaughtered the 400 prophets. And then you look over the other side of the mountain, you can see towards the sea shore where the small cloud came up as he was praying, and then the Lord broke the drought that was taking off there. And so as we move along in Carmel, we'll see the Jezreel Valley there, and we'll go up past Jezreel where Elijah ran ahead of the chariot and brought himself up to see Jezebel and confronts her, and then he runs from there all the way to southern Israel. So these are interesting historic places that are there. And then we move along the northern ridge, if you will, of the mountain range there, and come up to Megiddo. I'll just say a few things about Megiddo, because I think you're going to come up and talk a little more about your personal relationship there with Megiddo. It's also known as the plain of Esdraelon, okay, and that's another name for it. There are incredible battles there. Barak at Hazor, Ahaziah died there. Josiah died there when he came up against the Pharaoh Necho of Egypt, and thought he was going to, do something for the Lord, and he was killed there. Great weeping, as we hear about in that valley, over his death, because Josiah, in Isaiah chapter 6, in the year that King Josiah died, Isaiah is just distraught before the Lord, and then he gets a call to go to the people, because so there's some tremendous things that happen there. This is a tell. A tell is a series of a city that is developed, usually with walls for protection, and then as attacks and changes come, the rubble is just rubble, right down on top of it, and they just build right over the top of it. And there are over 20 strata of civilizations that have been developed there on that tell. And so it makes a mountain, a hill, if you will, and they call it a tell. And that's what's happening there. Ahab. During Ahab's time, they built a great water cistern. Okay, I'll let you tell more about it. You love to talk about that. But this cistern was out, the water source was outside the city gates. And so what they did is they built a big cistern and a tunnel all the way outside the city gates, blocked up the entrance from outside, and then had access for the water inside the city. It's really interesting to go down and see how they developed that, and we'll look for that. I'm gonna go ahead and stop from there, because we're going to talk about, then we move that day to Mount Arbel, which is through the Galilee, over the Samaria area, and up to the ridge of the Sea of Galilee, and you get to overlook it, and you get this incredible perspective of the whole layout of the Sea of Galilee, where we'll be focusing for the next few days. Yes? Petra will come later, as we're down in Jerusalem during that time. We'll go south. This is up in the north.
So actually, we will not be visiting Petra. Petra requires a different kind of tour, because you end up leaving country to see Petra. So on this tour, we will not be going to Petra. Down in Jordan is where I'm thinking you're thinking.
We're not going there, but that is down in the south,
Yeah, you actually have to add.
It's a whole passport problem. It's a whole tour guide problem. There's a whole lot of things that have to be adjusted, in order for that to take place. And it can happen, though, but yes, it has a lot to do with it. Anyways, any questions? And I'm gonna leave you to talk a little more about Megiddo when it's time there, okay? God bless. Well, thank you. And I'm looking forward to it. Every time we go, we find new things out about where we're going. God bless you.
Thanks, Dave. As Carolyn comes up, we're going to show a video. This is just without sound, but it's an aerial view of Megiddo. Megiddo. And for our folks online, they'll have a better view of that as well. So for our first day where we're actually touring sites, this one might be the most strenuous, but it's not. And I will mention, as Carolyn gets ready to share here, and just as a reminder, for sure, part of your preparation for a tour of Israel is to be in shape. And so start walking. Walk. There are not ADA compliance issues in Israel. There's uneven ground everywhere, stairs everywhere. The biggest, largest amount of walking we will do is literally in Jerusalem, where it's just layered upon layered stairs. And so definitely want to begin walking and working on your exercise. Go ahead, Carolyn.
Good morning. I'll tell you, Megiddo is one of my very favorite places to go. I love history. I am a history buff to the max. The word tel means old. And if you look at the city of Tel Aviv, tel means old, Aviv means new. So it's the city of old and the city of new. So Tel Aviv actually kind of gives you the concept there. But Megiddo is one of my very favorite places, and the reason I fell in love with Megiddo was a book that David actually suggested I read, and it's called The Source by James Michener. Now, some of his history is, of course, a little lacking because he's definitely a non-Christian, non-religious viewpoint, but the story of the 20 different layers of that city caught my attention, and how they lived, the different generations that lived, the different civilizations, the different cultures, the different people that lived there over 5,000 years struck my heart with interest, and I got so excited about it. So I've actually read that book probably 3 or 4 times, and I probably will read it again before I go back because it just brings things right up to me personally. But when you're in Megiddo, which is part of what you're seeing here now, it's like David said, it's 20 different cities built on top of each other. 20 cities. So when the archaeologists went over there and started studying there, they would cut slices in the walls going down to the very bedrock of that city. And in doing that, they discovered the original group that lived there by the artifacts that were left, and then they reestablished each group of people that lived throughout the 20 different civilizations that lived there. That is incredible to me. I just absolutely love that. It actually had 5,000 years of civilization, as I mentioned before, but it was abandoned, actually completed in the 5th century before Christ. And I'm not going to be as long as David did because I'm just zeroing in on this one city. But they went down to the Canaanite level, you know, the different levels that were there. And when you go to Jerusalem, for instance, when you go through the tunnel of Hezekiah, there's also a tunnel just beside that. That's a dry tunnel where Hezekiah's tunnel is wet, has water in it. But the dry one is actually a Canaanite tunnel that was built. And so the Canaanites were way back when, and cities were established accordingly. When you look at Megiddo, you see the different groups of people that live there, the different civilizations, but you also see the artifacts that were left behind. An artifact is anything that is found from a different generation that's brought forth that represents that particular generation. And they've studied those things, and they've pinned it down to the people that actually lived there and how they lived and what they did and how they did it. And there was a period of time when you will find in the Bible, it talks a lot about the children were passed through the fire. And you think, well, they just kind of waved the children over the fire is how it sort of sounds. But no, it was like children were sacrificed to the god Moloch, and they were burnt to death as a sacrifice. So there's all this history that's absolutely incredible. And as you continue to study, there's a silo that's built there down, well, I think you can see it. It's to the left of the screen there. But it's a silo, and there's a stairway going down it, and then there's another stairway that comes up out of it. And they would store grain there, and the people would go down to leave the grain or to get the grain according to what season of the year it was, and then bring it up the other way. And we were able to stand and look into that granary area. It's huge. I mean, it's absolutely huge. And they have found so many different artifacts of these different countries that it's absolutely remarkable. The Philistines lived there. The Canaanites lived there. The Egyptians were there. The Assyrians were there. Israelites were there. All these different people, all these different generations that actually lived there. When King David was actually the one also in his time that he actually captured the city to bring the city up to a height and level, and where he would rule northern Israel through the city of Megiddo. And his son, Solomon, was the one who went up there and really established it even larger, and it became a real significant place. In fact, he had stables there that would carry, the stables actually would hold about 350 horses. And then they had another area where it would actually hold the chariots that they would use for battle and things like that. So the history of just this one place should just get you all excited about going and seeing what is under there. But King Solomon rebuilt it as a royal city, and he again governed the northern country through the city of Megiddo. But as David mentioned briefly, the tunnel is what fascinates me the most, because as the tale grew higher and higher, the city's water was way out here to the outside to the bottom of the hill area there. So they drilled this tunnel, and I mean, if I outstretched my arms, it would be me outstretched once again in order to show you the width of this tunnel, and it's high. So I mean, the engineering feat to do that, to me, is so incredible. It takes, I think it's 127, 129 steps to go down, and they have these metal steps that you walk down so you can hang on, but it's a little exciting to go. But you go all the way down to the tunnel base, and then you walk through the tunnel, and then you come up out of that to the other side, and the bus will drop you off at one end and then pick you up at the other end of this tunnel. But walking through that tunnel, you can look at it and see the chisel marks that they made into the walls and the ceiling in order to drill through solid rock to get to the waterway. And because the waterway was open outside, they ended up covering that up and building it in such a way that the outside people that would come in to invade them would never see it. But the water source would be available for the people to be able to be there and to get the water that they needed for their daily living. To me, that is one of the most huge engineering feats. I can't imagine what it would take today to build that kind of a tunnel. But back then, when they didn't have the stuff that we have today, that's huge. That's a huge feat. And to be able to walk through there, you just breathe. You just breathe the history that's there and what it took for them to drill through solid ground, solid rock, to get to the water source. It's an incredible thing. So everywhere you go in Israel, there's history there. Everywhere you go, there's people that have given their lives so that that little city, the little state of Israel. And by the way, people say, well, how big is Israel? Well, it's about 50 miles wide, and it's roughly 200 miles long, roughly. So you could actually put several Israels in the state of Oregon if you lined them up side by side. So much history is just in this one place. So encourage you to go, encourage you to read ahead of time as much as you can, because when you go there, things will make a whole lot more sense than if you just go and say, well, what's this, what's that, what happened here, you know. Your tour guide is going to be explaining a lot of these things to you, but to read things ahead of time will help you to grasp what it is you're going to see what you see, and then when you come back, read more about it so you can see what you saw. And that's exciting. Thank you.
Thank you, Carolyn, Pastor Carolyn. Oh, let me tell you, traveling with Pastor Dave, Pastor Carolyn, our tour guide, I mean, You're really at your leisure. You can literally just sit back and listen and enjoy. You can ask questions. We always say our pastors who are going for themselves. Don't inundate them with questions, but Pastor Dave and Pastor Carolyn are the exception to the rule. They love questions and they love to talk about where we're at. They're very knowledgeable. And so we do have, I have a few of my books back there that you can check out. And I will post online a couple resources that you can get on Amazon because you can literally, the resource that I'm thinking of is you can look up the site, and then below the site is listed some facts, historical facts and context, and also all of the Bible scriptures that could be related to that area or to that specific location. And that's very helpful. And I just want you to know, when you're on tour in Israel, you'll do all the preparation you can, and then you'll get there and it feels like you're still putting your mouth to a fire hose and you're just getting inundated with so much. And so what we always tell our travelers, you for sure will be bringing a journal. You should bring a journal. And when you're exhausted and you just ate dinner, you can go out and sit out by the Sea of Galilee or go out and overlook the city of Jerusalem. Write down what stood out. Write down what you did. I know I did it electronically on my phone, and I can't tell you how many times I've gone back to look at that just to remember what happened. But then write it down. It's going to be important because some days you're going to hit the bed and you're going to be like, I'm going to sleep. But if you at least quickly jot down some things, you can always go back to it, remind yourself. And this is a game changer. This trip is a game changer. It is such an amazing trip. I'm going to show a couple pictures. So here's Pastor Carolyn. Remember this, Pastor Carolyn? She's leading a devotional at Megiddo. So that is down ground level, and then we kind of hike up a bit. Now, Pastor Carolyn mentioned the stairs, 129 stairs. So again, that's part of the physicality that's required of this trip. I just want you to know, if you go on the trip and you're not somebody like, I don't know if I can do 129 stairs, don't worry about it. You'll actually go to the bus. The bus drives around and picks up the rest of the group. So when there are places like that where it's really challenging for you, you'll miss out, but you won't miss everything. Does that make sense? Yeah, Dave. Yeah, those stairs are going down, not up. So that is a little bit easier. I love this. This is part of the aqueduct. Again, Roman ingenuity. Actually, this aqueduct fed Caesarea Maritime, and one of the things it fed fresh water to was Herod's freshwater pool on the coast. Just amazing. I don't know on this particular tour, because we're not spending the extra day, we'll at least drive by it. I don't think we actually get out. So you will see the aqueduct, and we will talk about that. Another great view, I think that's an olive tree. What you're looking at is on our way over to Mount Arbel. This is overlooking Nazareth. I wanted to say Bethlehem, but I knew that wasn't right because that's closer to Jerusalem. This is on our way. This is overlooking Nazareth. We will end up back in Nazareth to do a tour I cannot wait. I mean, honestly, they keep it period. The guides who take you through, it's on a hillside, so you'll see some of the historical ways in which they raised their animals, how they pressed olive oil. They'll deeply connect it to Scripture. We were just flabbergasted on that trip, so much so that on this tour, we planned a meal, a traditional historical meal at that location, and then we'll tour. And so I don't think Dave knew that, or Carolyn, but we're actually having lunch at this place in Nazareth, and so... Yeah, so, I want that night, again, after we are atop Mount Arbel, I didn't have a picture, sorry, Dave, but when we're atop Mount Arbel, you oversee the entire Sea of Galilee. Magnificent. When we're looking down, the Sea of Galilee be to the right, just to the left, and you'll see it again when we're at Magdala. You can see the crease in the valley, and that would have been the roadway that Jesus and the disciples traveled to Jerusalem from the Sea of Galilee, the main travel way. And so you're just constantly stunned when you're traveling, not only the historical context and the importance of this area, but biblically, everything that takes place. That is the stairs from a ginormous deck on the Sea of Galilee at our hotel. And so my daughter there is the one with her feet in the water. She wanted to swim, and she saw some really big fish and decided not to. I said, honey, that's Jonah, that's Mediterranean, that's not Sea of Galilee, so you're okay. But certainly you have the option to swim in the Sea of Galilee. It's just magnificent. And so we will spend 4 nights there. You will be rested, and it's a magnificent hotel. We always show pictures of food. I always laugh at people who take pictures of food. You'll take pictures of food in Israel, folks. The Mediterranean diet is fantastic. And I am not a salad person. I love salad, traditional salad, but macaroni salads, other salads. I don't know. And the first trip I went, I made a commitment. I'm going to eat everything that's there. I'm going to try everything. Folks, I think there was only one thing I didn't like. Everything is magnificent. When they say the land of milk and honey, what's raised there, the food, the produce, the vegetable, it's just incredible. And there we are, Dave, there's Bill, Hal, and I. That was our first night. You might be able to see in the picture, can you see the boats in the water there? On one of our days, you'll have to look on the itinerary, we're on the Sea of Galilee on one of those boats, floating on the Sea of Galilee, doing Jewish dances on the boat, on the water. It is phenomenal. And you just get a bird's eye view of the main areas like Magdala, Mount Beatitudes off in the distance, which we will visit. And honestly, on the boat on the Sea of Galilee is definitely in my top 10 for me. I really, really enjoy it. All right, we covered a lot. Let me run over a couple more things, and then we'll take some questions. One of them being, if you've already registered and sent in your form, it had your email on it, so you do not need to do this. But if you're interested in going, you're just not even sure, but you want to stay informed, I need you to grab one of these cards in the back, on the very back table, put your name, phone number, and email. Not everybody's on Facebook, and we know that. And so we will start sending out via phone and email reminders about the meetings and things that are coming up. For instance, even before our next meeting, we will likely already have our flights. And so we would be pushing out that information early to you so that you know when our flight is out of Los Angeles to Tel Aviv, okay? So fill this out, name, phone number, and email. Only I will use that. I won't give it to anybody else. We will use that. You can do it on the white cards there. Also, many people ask when you register, it says dual occupancy, and what's the supplemental thing? If you're a single person traveling single, just put down double occupancy. What that means is we will pair you up with a roommate. If you already have a preferred roommate, then you identify each other, which that's already happening here. And so you would just check double occupancy, and there's a spot there where you can list the name of the person you know you're traveling with and you want to room up with. And what they do then is they'll ask you for your bed preference configuration. So it probably says 2 doubles, for instance. And that's how they arrange it. So they pre-arrange all of our lodging for us. And if you're a single person and there's no other single same-sex person who's going on the trip, don't worry about it. That then gets figured out, okay? The preference being some people who they don't want a roommate. They're on a CPAP machine. They don't want to be with anybody. Then you will pay that extra $1,000 for the privilege of staying in your own room, okay? Does that answer that question? I know that's a common one. Any questions? Lavenna? Yes, our folks online, you can email me, or actually here, throw up the banner that has our church website, Lavenna, pcfoursquare.org. If you go under events, there is an Israel tab. You can see all the itinerary. You can register online. You can print forms. Also on our church website is my email address under contact. And so I won't even say my email address because it's my last name and it's long. But pcfoursquare.org, email me from there, and you can do that as well. Yeah, and there was a question over here. Lisa. Yes. So communications, communication via phone we talk about as we get closer. So I will tell you our next meeting is scheduled June 12th, and we'll make sure you stay, and September 11th and November 13th. When we hit January 2022, we meet every month, and the meeting is exclusively for people who are touring with us. So when we hit January 2022, our meetings are closed and only for those who are registered and touring with us. And what we do then is at that point, we start talking about cell phones. We actually do a demonstration of how to pack and get the most out of your packing. We give you lots of resources and links to watch videos. And also during that time, God willing, we bring a group here and they teach us a few Jewish dances as well. And so we do a lot of fun things starting in January that get us geared towards actually traveling together. And so some of those things, now I will tell you on my cell phone, there are apps. You do not need a chip. There are apps that allow you to call Wi-Fi calling, and there's Wi-Fi everywhere in Israel just like there is in the United States. And so most of our cell phone companies, all you would have to do is contact your cell phone company, but we will talk about that. We'll talk about the apps. We never once bought a special phone or a chip. We just used the apps and we called home a few times. Honestly, when Levin and I are traveling this trip, we don't even want to call home. But I did do some videos for our church and uploaded them through Wi-Fi at our hotels, and that was fun. They loved getting those. And so, good. Any other questions? What? No. There's the meeting dates. June 12th and September 11th are the two. Yeah, Dave. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That is true, and in that kind of situation, the tour company is still going to check in with us to find out how we want to handle that. But yes, so for instance, Adam's mother in Colorado, hi Mom, who's online, she will be registering. But remember, if she's going, as long as she gets herself to LA for the flight, then the tour company doesn't care. If somebody's joining us later or at Tel Aviv or later, then they do need to notify the tour company. At that point, the tour company would notify us as well. And so, yeah. We'll be on a charter bus. Actually, for this tour, I have not done it on the last few, but for this tour, have any of you been on tours and you have the little pocket deal with the earphones, and so you can hear the tour guide talking the whole time? Levin and I were just on a trip, and we did the electric bikes, and the guy was doing it, talking. Those are phenomenal. We are going to make those available so you can hear the tour guide. Oftentimes when we're moving through areas, and especially thinking about people who are maybe a little bit harder of hearing, it's hard to hear the tour guide. So we're going to offer those. I know I'm going to use it. I hate it when I go on tour and I miss something. I don't want to miss anything. I'm like this psycho extrovert who is afraid of missing something. And so on the tour, we'll make sure that we have personal devices and so that you can hear the questions and hear the tour guide. The tour guide, she is a Christian tour guide. She will give us a full historical, biblical, and modern day context of where we're at in every site. You're encouraged to bring your Bible, a physical Bible, or your app. But every site, she'll remind you, bring your Bible, because every site we open the Bible and it will at least read or share a little bit about the context of where we're at. And so, yeah. Customs. Oh, I love these questions. Yeah. So I'm not going to share a whole lot here because in January we will, but customs is different. It is strict, and we do talk a lot about that. Bill Howell, in one of the pictures, he and I get along really well, and he's a troublemaker. And if he's listening, he'll love it and appreciate this. And when we looked at the whole group, we thought, Bill Howell's the only one that might give us troubles. And we actually coach you. We'll coach you when we're in customs. We'll tell you what you can say and what you cannot say, and you do not joke around. Joking during customs is highly frowned on, and not only will I chastise you, but you might end up in a strip search. I mean, it's a true story. So we will talk about what you can and cannot do. You most certainly cannot wear under your clothing a money belt, for instance. You absolutely cannot wear anything under your clothing for security to get through customs. You can once we're in country, if you prefer. And so we'll talk about all that, but it is strict. We were surprised how easy it was to get in. Honestly, I was. Going out, not so much. And so Levin and I went up. What they do is they take the tour leaders, and they'll take us up. They'll talk to us, why are you here, what are you doing, blah, 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 blah. And we're like, yeah. And that's our group. Yeah, that's our group. And then they're like, all right. And they leave. And they walk the line, and they're going to randomly pick somebody out. And we're like, oh, God, don't pick Bill Howell. Don't pick Bill Howell. And the people walked straight to Bill Howell and pulled him out of line. Oh, God, help Bill Howell. Help Bill Howell. He was great. We had so much fun with that. We laughed at that. You know, when we're in country, sometimes we'll get back to the hotel early. Jerusalem is, on the Sea of Galilee, there's not a whole lot around. It's not like you're going to walk leaving our hotel to go someplace because it's a long walk. But in Jerusalem, when we're in our hotel, every night a few of us would leave our hotel after we ate dinner, and we would go explore the old city of Jerusalem at night, and we would go see the Western Wall lit up at night. Wow. Bill Howell and I caught a cab, and we went to a fire station. I'm a firefighter. We went to a fire station, and we exchanged paraphernalia, and they took us on a tour, and we got to see their equipment, and then caught the taxi back. So there's opportunities like that. We talk about going with buddies. We talk about safety, and those are great opportunities to do extracurricular activity while we're on tour. Yes, we will talk all about clothing. Yeah, especially starting in January. You'll want a combination of long sleeve, long pants, and short sleeve. We hit anywhere from the 60s, which to us is like, oh, to 90 plus. And so, yeah, and everything in between as far as what. Now, on our particular trip, when we hit Jerusalem, and it was supposed to be high mid-70s, low in the 40s, so, dress accordingly. High 98 degrees, and we suffered. Poor Oregonians. I'm like, what? We're in the Mediterranean. That should be this hot. Thank you, Jesus. But it's challenging when you're walking through. Yeah, so on our tour, we do create opportunities for exploring, for shopping. There are alternatives. For instance, one thing you should definitely do when we're in Jerusalem is the Holocaust Museum. And if you've been to one, fine. But if you've never been there, it's hard and it's challenging. I think we're dedicating about half a day or so for that. But if you've already been or you're not sure, we have created an alternative activity, for instance, during that. But if you've never been, you should go. And it's sobering. And it's just an incredible experience at the Holocaust Museum in Israel, in Jerusalem. Any other questions? These are good. Dave, did you have a question? Oh. Are you guys getting excited? I mean, come on. What else? What else you want to know? Every meeting, we're going to have, Dave did a phenomenal job. So every meeting, we're going to alert you. We're going to pique your curiosity, both historically and biblically, where we're going to be. We'll then leave it in your hands. We'll get resources to you. If I was going to name my top 3, it changes all the time, I would have to say Mount Beatitudes, because as you're overlooking the Sea of Galilee and down just below us is Tabgha, you can picture Jesus preaching and the masses of people at the hillside. You can hear things up the hillside. So then you're like, oh, not only was it miraculous that people could hear, number one. Number two, sound really carries up the hillside. Hezekiah's tunnel, Carolyn mentioned that. Hezekiah's tunnel in Jerusalem, there's only a few sites where you are literally walking on the very ground. You are touching the very surface that people, I mean, how many BC is Hezekiah's tunnel? Yeah, I mean, when you're walking through that tunnel, you are touching the hammer and chisel marks of the men, and probably not women, so probably men who were digging that tunnel. When we are in front of Pontius, right? Is it the stairway where Jesus, there's a stairway that is historically known, it's factual, that hasn't been built over, replaced. It is the actual stairs Jesus would have walked on when he was taken and questioned and persecuted. Yeah. 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 Yeah, so even and for those online, Dave was talking about Hezekiah's tunnel, how things have opened up. I know for Carolyn and for Dave, they've been multiple times. Every trip they've seen and experienced something completely new and different. And that will be true for this tour as well. And so, yeah. Any other questions? I just don't even want to leave. I get all excited when I start talking about Israel. All right, so keep saving your money. $300 and filling out the form and sending it to Pilgrim Tours secures your spot on the tour. Just a reminder, we intend to take 30 or less. We have 5. And there's at least that many or more who are for sure going. They just haven't registered yet. So I'm confident we're about 10 or 12 folks who've made a decision. And so, yeah. We won't talk about vaccination until later. It'll depend on what Israel's doing and then what is required for international travel from our country. Yes? Okay. It's 7%. 9.8%. Yeah, so in your brochure, thank you for that. In your brochure is a handout talking about the insurance, what it covers, and then I'm sure on the flyer, thank you for that, it says when and how you're supposed to pay for that insurance as well. And again, when I was asked that, it's a 50-50. I mean, I've gone on these tours, more than half didn't bother with the insurance. They were fine traveling. We paid for somebody from our church to go last trip. And so since the church paid for it, I paid for the insurance. She was elderly. And so I thought, you know what, I'm just going to make sure our investment's covered. And so, yeah. Yeah, so travel insurance covers more than just your luggage. It covers if there's an accident, if you got sick last minute or hospitalized before you left, those kinds of things. So it covers more than just your personal belongings? Yeah. Yeah, so make sure and read the material. and there is a phone number on there, so if you have any questions, but just make sure you read the material. And so, yeah. Any other questions? You're going to be free to go. Is there any questions online? Did we check? Oh, hi, Mom. Mom just said hi. Tracy's on there, Tracy and Mike, and several others who are, Bill did. Bill Howe, if you caught it, I told the story about you in the security line in Customs. It was amazing. We're so glad you behaved. Debbie. Oh, so here's what they do is they ask you a series of questions: where you've been, who are you with, and then what do you have in your bag. I'll tell a quick story. I'm a rules follower. When it comes to these things, I follow the rules. Our tour guide was absolutely naughty. She would take us through sites and say, oh yeah, if you see stuff, just pick it up and keep it and take it home with you. And so we're in Caesarea Maritime, and there's like broken pottery and things. And I was told, and we were all told, you can't do that. And she's like, so I've got all these now treasure hounds on tour. I'm like, they're not even listening. They're bent over half the time picking up stuff off the ground. And they're collecting stuff. And we go to Magdala. Now, Magdala last tour was our very first time for all of us. We're definitely doing it again. It is incredible. And it's a relatively new dig. And it's on the Sea of Galilee. And everywhere is like ancient pottery, broken, but they've used it for, and I'm like, oh yeah, you could just pick up any of that and take it home. So I've got this tour full of people who have their bags full of stuff. And I'm like, oh boy, all right, whatever. And we were fine. And so it's fine. And the tour guides, each one's unique. Ours will explain to us what you can and can't do. Obviously, when we're on the seas and the shells and the sand, and lots of people brought little things to pack things in. Ziploc bags are a big deal. You definitely want to bring some Ziploc bags so you can put some of those items in and protect it. And then also, when you buy something, I've been on tour and I've had people say, I am buying a nativity scene from Jerusalem. And they literally saved up money and they bought a $2,000 plus nativity scene, and they had it shipped from Jerusalem to their home address. So, there's all of the modern luxury of, if there's something you buy there, it's bigger, you can have it shipped. It's not a big deal. And layers. Your favorite dress in attire will be the pants that have zipper legs, and you can zip them off. For the ladies, and you'll know this, and for men too in some of the sites, but especially the ladies, you'll know some of the sites are Muslim controlled or stricter in how women are dressed. You'll know that ahead of time. So a sarong that you wrap around your shorts, a scarf, those will be things you'll know well ahead and how to dress. But yeah, just layers. And remember, we're on a bus, and so you can leave stuff. We always tell people, bring dollar bills. The bus always has bottled water for $1. Your $1, and your bus driver will be your new best friend this entire trip. And so, yeah. Anybody? American dollars. Yep. Yeah, in fact, you're better off to have American money. Yeah, you can always exchange for shekels. Man, I had to think about it for a minute. I have some shekels back there on the table, but you can exchange for shekels, but American dollars spend really well there. And as long as you know roughly the exchange, also when we're shopping on free days, it's all about the barter. So if you like to barter, again, I don't like to barter. I just want to pay what the price says. My daughter who was shopping, she really wanted a certain kind of sandals, and she loved the sandal. And it was, I think it was in the Muslim quarters, and the shop owner, and you'll feel the tension between Muslims and Jews and Christians. You'll feel it. You're safe. But my daughter was there, and she noticed that the shop owner mistreated a woman poorly. And they had just gotten to a price they could arrive at. My daughter's like, nope, I'm not going to buy from you. What, nope. You were not nice to that lady. I'm not buying from you. And she moved on. She moved on. And she bartered with somebody else that she liked. And so you truly are bartering there. and the shop owners will test you. It'll just depend on how good at bartering you are. And you'll get used to that. You'll see how things go usually. Yeah. Yeah. Those people didn't. Yeah. So people online didn't hear, but in regards to bartering, hang out with Pastor Carolyn. You'll get what you want at what price you want. She is one tough lady. Yeah. Obviously, there's a lot of tourism type, but it's interesting. In some of the places in Jerusalem, you'll come off the bus, and there's only a few places like this, but you'll be immediately accosted by street vendors. But I will say, there's only a few places, and the tour guides will tell you, look, there's certain things you don't want to buy from the street vendors like that. But Lavenna, there was one street vendor, and she engaged, was it a lady? It was a lady, I think, with the lady, and she bought 3 scarves because it was early in the trip, and she wanted scarves to wear that were from there. And they ended up being legitimate scarves and a great price. And so it's just, again, American tourism, right? I mean, we get all excited about shopping all of a sudden when it's happening, but you'll have lots of opportunity. And we'll create some of those opportunities, and other times, you're just going to do what you do and look for what you want. And there's different things. We're going to get baptized at the Jordan. There's shops everywhere at every major site, and so if you want a specific keepsake from that site, when we do communion on the last day in Israel, we do communion at the garden. You're given the cup that we take communion with. And so you'll see a couple carved out communion cups back there. So you're given those items. I know many people bought anointing oil from Israel, from Jerusalem, things like that. And so, it's crazy these days, right? I mean, you can get everything there you want here on Amazon. It's a true statement. But there's something about being there and making the choice for yourself and bringing something back. And so, yeah, good. It'll be all the memories and all the history, and it will radically change how you read your Bible for sure. All right, I'm going to cut us loose, but we're going to hang out and answer questions, and our online folks can bail, and we can end the recording there. We will put it up on YouTube later as well. All right, God bless you. Thanks for coming. Come with us.